Hello, everybody. Welcome to my first NFP channel. Today, I'm just gonna give a little story about my journey. So, it's been more than 22 years. My quest, my interest in NFP started. Okay. First of all, I'm going to tell you the story of when I was naive, okay? So I remember as a teenager, I used to have 29 days period. I had that up until when I got pregnant for my first daughter, my first child. But before then, as a college kid, nobody ever told me that, the only thing my mom told me when I started having my period was to write down the date that my period started, and that was it. She never told me that, I didn't know anything, the science behind the reproductive part of my body, nothing, to the point where I didn't know that, well, I don't even, like, by then I wasn't thinking about, will I have kids? Will I even get married? It hadn't come to my thoughts whether I was going to get married or not. But one thing I noticed was that at some point within, before the end of the cycle, I would notice some, substance. And then I got worried. And then I would go to the hospital and I'll be sent to the lab where I do, um, they make me do lab tests of the culture of whatever it is that showed up. And they were just treating me. Every time they put me on antibiotics, they put me on, medicine for thrush and all that. But, or even sometimes my mom would just buy me an over-the-counter thing telling me they're treating yeast or something. But to be frank, I don't think I needed to do that. So the reason I said that is that when you take antibiotics, it shifts the flora of your body, and then it subjects you to yeast infection, right? But however, whenever I see the lab results, this was done back home in Nigeria. Most times they are written with hand, just the regular hand. You just see this plus plus plus. They put me on this antibiotics. I take them. Next month again, I see the same thing. After a while, I just stopped because I'm like, this medicine is not working. It's not stopping this thing coming out of my body. But then at the same time, we did not realize that that was how it's part of, well, it's the normal way that the body should function. So that was my first oops in feminine health. My mom did not tell me that part. So no teacher, we didn't learn it in school, nothing. So that part. Then close to when I was getting married, I stumbled upon a book, an NFP book. In my mom had that in her shelf, and I picked it up and I tried to read it because I wanted to understand what was in it. But she took it away from me. African parents. I believe what she thought was that if I gained the knowledge, then I was gonna use it the wrong way. So, for me, my curiosity actually led me to this. Okay, so my mom took that book away from me. I did not try to fight her or try to get the book back, or maybe, I don't know, but I just took it off my mind. But in my mind, I still had that curiosity of wanting to know the content of that book. So when I got married to my husband, Okay, that was the second oops, okay? The oops that my mom should have trusted that I loved myself more than any other person can love me. And I already made up my mind who I wanted to be. So it wasn't the book that was going to make me change what I had in mind of how I wanted to be. So the second oops was that my mom had a teaching moment, but she did not use it. I don't blame her because eventually later on, when I went back to her, she told me she didn't even, when she did the lesson or the training, she did not understand it. So the third oops, I got married. You know, in Nigeria, when you get married, you're expected to try to have a baby right away. Okay? When a month passes and people are looking, no baby. Second month, no baby. Third month, no baby. You know, it keeps going. So, what was actually happening? The vague lesson I got was from my friends. And what I overheard was that the 14th day of your cycle, you tried to make a baby. I kept going on the 14th day. You know, I was in school. Actually, I got married when I was in my final year in college, okay? So I lived in the dorms and went home for the weekend. And then if the weekend lands within the 14th day of my cycle, maybe 15, 13, I mean 13, 14, 15, and maybe I'm targeted. They said it's 14th day, and then I go maybe 13, 14, 15, and I still come back 2 weeks after I see my cycle, my period again. Then I started wondering, I'm like, I know that I didn't do anything to myself that should prevent me from not making, not getting pregnant. So it kept going. 6 months, I never got pregnant. Then when I graduated college, my husband was already transferred to Kano in the northern part of Nigeria. And when I joined him, probably he too was asking people questions about maybe how to get pregnant. So what happened was that, when I tried for the 6 months and nothing actually happened, like I took my mind off it. I even stopped writing, you know how my mom said, write the date of your cycle. I stopped writing that completely. But the month I joined my husband in Kano, for the next 30 days that I set my foot in Kano, without my permission, my husband was trying to have a baby. I had no clue. I was like, okay, maybe we've been apart for too long. I didn't understand what he was doing. So for 30 consecutive days, we, we were working hard to make our first baby. So I remember, I was like, okay, we've been trying for the past 6 months and nothing happened. And my friend was about to get married. My friend, my classmate, and my cousin, Linda. So my husband was like, um, I told my husband because I assumed that we were going to be at her wedding because she was at our wedding. So when the time was approaching, my husband came, we were taking a walk one day and he said, I don't think I'll be able to go to that wedding because I have too much going on at work. We've been so busy. There's so much going on. I think you should go alone. I'm like, how do I go from Kano? I can't, I don't know my way. Maybe I would just take a flight, go by air. He was like, well, yes, you go. All right. Shortly after that, we got news that his sister lost a baby, lost a pregnancy, okay? And then he said to me, Chi, I don't think you'll go for that wedding. I'm like, no, that's my very close friend and sister. There's just no how. If I don't show up for our wedding, that wedding may not hold and she would never forgive me. Then my husband said one thing. He said, if you get pregnant, you don't go. Then if you don't get pregnant, you can go. So I was like, well, I've not gotten pregnant for the past 6 months, so I'm certainly going to go. We kept waiting, and the day for the wedding came. Nothing, no sign of my period. Passed, the day of the wedding passed, no sign of my period. So when we worked 30 days at it, I was like, oh my goodness, I've never seen this kind of energy in my husband. Well, right after the 30 days, he quit. Like, I was like, so what's going on? You're not coming again. So eventually I fell sick, and I went to the hospital, and they told me that I had typhoid fever, which I had never had my entire life. So I was like, how did I get typhoid? I eat right. I mean, I boil my water. I don't just eat anywhere. And the doctor was like, well, it can come from anywhere, even when you try to be too clean. I'm like, oh, all my life in the East, I had never got that. Even when I was in college, I never had typhoid for once. And I started thinking, well, he said, well, we have two typhoid medicines that really work, but one is not good for pregnancy. So I'm going to do a pregnancy test for you. And if you're pregnant, I can't give you that one, then I'll give you another one. So I was like, do the test. I'm not pregnant. It's not possible. I've been trying for the past 6 months and it never happened. Lo and behold, I was pregnant. And I wasn't ready for that. I don't know. Somehow I was just too sure that I couldn't have a baby at that point. So that was how I got pregnant for my baby girl. So in her case, I couldn't even tell how far along because I didn't write the date anymore. It was by ultrasound that they were able to measure, when I got pregnant or when, I didn't know my last menstrual period. I didn't know the date. Okay, now I'm pregnant. And then in the church we attended in Kano said that they were going to teach natural family planning classes and that you have to be there with your spouse. Usually I stayed home, I just finished at college and I was getting ready for my service year. In Nigeria, when you complete your college degree, you spend 1 year doing youth service. So I was posted somewhere in Kano, okay? So I was mostly home most of the time. So I went in for this NFP class, and the tutor was like, I'm just gonna let you come into this class alone today. Tomorrow, I need to see the man and the wife. I'm not gonna let anybody come here without his or her spouse. I told my husband about the class. He was not ready yet. He was like, we've been wanting to have babies. Why would we go learn how to prevent ourselves from having babies? And I was like, no knowledge is a waste, right? Just let's get the knowledge and put it in our knowledge bank and bring it out when we need it. So I couldn't convince him. I went back the next day, and all those who came along without their spouses were told to step aside, to step out. And Kano is really hot. It's as hot as Houston. So I came from the East. I wasn't used to that kind of sun. I stood out there for the entire class, and at the end of the whole thing, I just decided, there was no point standing outside. So what I did, I just bought the book. There's a book that they sold, they used for the class. I felt so bad. Why? Because I have a friend. I met a lady I met in Kano who's from the same town as my husband. We became very close friends. She and her husband were there for the class. I was like, oh my goodness, how do I convince my husband to be in this class? So he said what he said, that he wasn't going to come. So that was how I missed actually being part of the class. And at that point, I was already pregnant too. I was like, what's the point? I'm already pregnant, so what am I going to learn? So I bought the book. I read it. You can't just, it's not a book you read once, it's like a Bible. You read, you go back to it again, you practice, you go back to it again. But it would have been better if I listened to a tutor because they were given home, assignments to take home assignments to do stuff like that. And to be frank, back then, my friend, I'm not sure if they were pregnant yet. Maybe they were. Yeah, they were because she had her baby shortly after I had mine. So, but she learned it really well. I learned it alone. Another oops. Family planning is better. Natural family planning is better learned, one, before you even try to have a baby. Two, together with your spouse. I'll tell you the reason why. I'm telling you the optimum way of having it done. And I'll tell you the reason why it is so. The reason why it is good to learn it um, before you start to have kids is so that if you make any errors, if you make any mistakes, they fall within the number of children you want to have. For instance, if I learned it before I started having children and I made mistakes, it will still land within the number of children that we planned to have versus how my husband thought, oh, how can we be asking, how can we be learning how to prevent when we are looking for? That was wrong. I don't blame him. We were both naive because if I knew better, I would have said no. Secondly, the reason why it has to be the couple together is one person, encourages the other. The main player is the woman, but if the man is involved, he prepares his mind mentally ahead of time. And each day he knows what is obtained or what is expected for each day before it is bedtime. But however, when you leave that job to only one spouse, that spouse can falter and you don't catch it. So in pharmacy, we call that double check, second check. In pharmacy, one staff does not start from data entry to verification. Somebody else enters the data, somebody else verifies it, like a second check. So that part is where people who say, oh, it's a woman's work. It means that you're giving her total control over something that should concern you because it's you. When a baby comes, she's not going to be the only one who suffers. You're still going to be part of it. Another reason why the both of you should do it, it is an activity that bonds a couple together. Because when you do a project with somebody, even if it's at work, if you do a project with somebody over some time, you begin to understand each other better. You're closer to that person and you know a few things here and there about that person versus if you don't have anything bringing you together. So this is one thing that can increase the couple's bonding, but we don't know because sometimes people say, people think that no method is natural family planning. People think guesswork is natural family planning. People think rhythm method is natural family planning. People think calendar method is natural family planning. All these things I mentioned are not. So another thing again, another oops there is you thinking that you can memorize all the observations you make you thinking that you can memorize everything. I made that error. I was very lazy in charting. Very lazy. When I say very lazy, I mean I chart today, I don't chart tomorrow. I chart today, I don't chart tomorrow. Why? I didn't have a second check. My husband would just say, just tell me what to do. Tell me, no, you don't do that. We did it, so don't do it because I want you to learn from my errors. Now, in as much as I did not chart well, I was still charting my period, which is my menses, which my mom taught me. I was very religious with that because I learned from my first pregnancy that I was supposed to submit the name of my last menstrual period, which I never knew. I've never heard anybody talk about pregnancy before it happened to me. Nobody. I've never been in close contact with anybody who went through it and never studied it either. I didn't do health science in high school. I did integrated science, then chemistry, then biology, then physics. I didn't do health science. I heard people who did health science actually went in depth when it came to reproductive health. But for my biology class, I was drawing the eye, the muscle, the brain, the skull, the skeleton, the digestive system. Nobody, okay, maybe we drew the diagram of the reproductive system, but nobody actually broke it down to what I eventually learned. I'm a visual learner because, we've seen natural family planning evolve. So when I learned it, it was just paper charting. Who knew? By then, there was nothing like the internet. There was nothing like phone video. For me to make this video then, I needed to hire a videographer or photographer, which would have been very expensive. But now we have our phones in the house. We have our, camera phones, phone video, you can still take videos on your phone. Yes, so, and that was it. So in the process, I'll tell you the errors that I made to still mentally practicing the calendar method, okay? When I started, when it was time to have my second son, maybe I started paying attention after reading the book that there's this kind of, there's a fertile period in your cycle. But one thing I didn't learn very well was that the signs showing up in your body and some other days are fertile. For instance, do you know that the day after, that's the day after the egg white is still fertile? The next day after the egg white is still fertile. And the third day after it, did you know that? I didn't know. So what I used to do then was wait, maybe observe the fertile signs. Once they stop, I think I'm free. But no. So if you look, I have a girl, I have boys. Why? Because I kept failing in the sense that once I stopped to see the peak, like the egg white mucus, I think, the dryness, I'll think, oh, then I'm free. You see, that's why proper education is key. I'm going to stop here so far, and I might share because I found that book. You will not believe it. That book survived 22 years. It was after I had my fifth kid that I was able to open that book. With the minimum charting that I made, a lot of things started showing up, getting revealed. Because within those cycles that I charted, like I told you, as soon as I got pregnant for my daughter, I never saw 29 days again. Yeah, I used to be so regular, but as soon as I had my daughter, the regularity ended. So for me to have stuck at it with irregular cycle, I think that's the reason why I should talk about this. Why? Because every form of situation that tampers with the cycle, I have experienced all of them. Right now, I'm doing the last lap of feminine health, which is premenopause. Okay, my mom got her menopause at around 45, so I'm 44. But I may not be like my mom. The reason being, last 2 years I was introduced to keto and I lost a lot of weight. And for the first time in a long time, I started seeing 29 days again. Okay, I'm gonna stop here so far. Maybe I'll do a part 2 to this, okay? It's really interesting. So I'll do the story part and then I start to do the teaching. I'm going to write with my hand, like I keep telling you. I'm going to chart to show you what a regular cycle looks like, what an irregular cycle looks like, things to pay attention to in a feminine, in a woman's chart. So I'll stop here so that this video doesn't, get too long and boring. Have a blessed day. It's actually around 1 o'clock too right now. I'm tired, but I just have to make this video because it's taking forever. Have a blessed day again. Bye.